The views and opinions expressed on Smack My Pitch Up are those of the panelists and not those of GUI Network, their sponsors, or any of the properties mentioned. Listener discretion is advised. This podcast is rated R for violence, language, and nudity. Well, it's a podcast, so you won't see the nudity. I just do it to make the guest uncomfortable.
In a world gone mad with unnecessary reboots, remakes, and sequels, only one podcast has the guts to make it even worse. This is Smack My Pitch Up.
Hello, geeks, and welcome to another amazing episode of Smack My Pitch Up, the podcast that reboots, remakes, reimagines, sequels, sidequels, and adapts some of your favorite and least favorite properties from film, television, and what have you. And tonight, we are digging deep into the middle of the 1980s for an absolutely classic sci-fi fantasy comedy by one of our favorite directors and producers of the 80s, John Hughes, who I oftentimes mistakenly call John Holmes. Those are entirely different movies. We are talking about Weird Science from 1985, the classic Frankenstein tale of two teenagers that are horned up enough to make their own living sex doll. And tonight with me, we've got Chris Porter to help us through this cavalcade of sci-fi hijinks. Howdy.
How you doing? Happy to be here.
Yeah, man. We've been talking for a while about having you on the show, and it was just a matter of like scheduling or figuring out what property to do. But I'm really glad we settled on Weird Science because it is that absolute classic, and we're relatively within the same age range. So as far as like our exposure to this film was probably around the same time of age and an era. And I feel probably is that like kind of informing movie a little bit. At least it was for me.
Absolutely. I'm excited about this. I've known this movie forever since I was a kid, so I'm thrilled to be talking about it today.
So were you a teenager or like pre-teenage years when you first saw this movie?
Well, I guess maybe kids too young. I think it was teenager. What year did this come out?
85, I want to say.
85? No, I was a kid. Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, I think it was just before teenage years, but it was in that like pre-pubescent. So I was interested in what teenagers did. And apparently what teenagers did was grow full-grown women out of their computers. So I was very let down when I went to school and found out that the Apple IIe computers that we had were not capable of such things. So.
Oh, believe me, I tried.
Yeah, right? There was something fantastic about the 1980s and the internet. This really shows in Weird Science with a lot of the scenes where they're going through these 3D rendered tunnels that I think are supposed to represent phone lines or the internet or something. It's very hackers kind of vibe to it.
Yes, it absolutely was. And looking at it today, it just seems crazy how they just plug the phone into it and then go straight into government mainframes without it just seemed like really too easy. Yeah, well,
it's that kind of war games vibe as well, where all you have to do is put your phone receiver on this thingy to talk to the computer, and then teenagers can control government computers, and all it takes is these kids with these newfangled, hacking styles that the adults don't understand how to do it. It shows an innocence about what technology was, like internet and computer technology was at the time, because the creators, the writers, and the director didn't understand technology enough to really make it not nonsense. It's just this like fantastical kind of version of computer technology, basically like magic.
Oh, I love it. It really kind of made this very nostalgic motif kind of thing that's great to look back on.
The tone of this movie is something that is not necessarily, it's very approachable as far as like everybody's been a horned up teenager before, But as far as subject matter, like the way that it was approached in the 1980s is very different than it would have been approached today, per se. Simply by the fact that there's two teenage boys that create an adult woman to fuck. Like that is the whole premise. That's the starting premise of this.
Right.
Is this like bombshell, hot, teased hair 80s woman in a crop top that wants to bone down two 15-year-old boys.
Yeah, it's really very relatable kind of life for at least somebody like me that was on one hand bullied, but on the other hand, horny as hell.
Right. But I was thinking about how you approach that with a remake or a modernized version of it. And one of the first things that I thought of doing was do a gender swap where it's like two women and then a male. And then I'm like, now there's an adult man that is being predatorily like sexual towards teenage girls. And so no, that can't work either. That is the best way to be like ridden out of all Hollywood on a rail, never to work again, is to gender swap Weird Science.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And there are always different ways to go with it. I was talking to my friend Joe, and he mentioned that it could very easily slip into a horror movie.
Very easily. Well, because it is kind of a wacky teen comedy version of the Frankenstein story. So,
yes,
I mean, it does have its roots in the horror tropes a little bit.
Right.
And they didn't lean in that way pretty much at all in the original. It was just wacky sci-fi, hilarity was where they were aiming. So,
especially when the person they created had so much magical power, she could have done basically anything and destroyed anybody's life, but they seem to avoid that idea.
I am intrigued by it's never really discussed in the original movie why she is obligated to fuck these children. Like she's apparently got the intelligence of Einstein, has like weird electricity wizard magic that she can just like make things happen, has control over the time-space continuum, is immensely powerful. But she keeps that all at bay because ultimately it comes down to the well-being and then sexual flowering or deflowering of these two young boys. It's bizarre. Like you would think that she'd be like, thanks for the life, peace. I'm going to go like take over the world or something. Right.
And they didn't say much in the movie other than, oh, you made me, so now I have to serve you. It's almost like a genie.
Right? And it's never explained why she does at all. So I would like to have a little bit more of that conversation in whatever version I do on why. Was that in the rule book of summoning a woman like into existence? But also another fun thing with this movie is a very, very early role for Robert Downey Jr. as one of the main like baddies in this, one of the popular kids that picks on the two main characters. And man, the amount of pop collars and teased hair in this movie is really incredible. So this being set in the 80s with a kind of interesting approach to the Frankenstein mythos, how are you going to approach this for your real take? Are you going to be setting it in the 80s? Are you going to be modernizing it? How are you dealing with the tone and the approach to the story?
Well, I was thinking kind of modernizing it in both time and tone, but still keeping some small connection to the original.
Okay.
So not a direct hard sequel, so you don't need to see the original to understand this one.
Sure.
But there are nods if you grew up with it.
Yeah, okay. So are you looking at kind of almost a reimagining approach to it, where it's not kind of beat for beat, it's its own animal, but it's definitely kind of an homage to the original?
Right. The same kind of idea, but definitely not a direct remake.
Okay. So kind of that like original Dawn of the Dead versus the Dawn of the Dead remake. Both are very good movies, but one is, they're not the same movie minus the whole mall being involved thing. Like that's
right
about it. So, okay, cool. That definitely gives you a little bit more room to avoid some pitfalls based on the storyline here. I decided to kind of do not necessarily a period piece, not necessarily set in the 80s, but kind of a modern version with retro tones to it. Like the soundtrack would be like retro wave. The style would be kind of like the modern 80s throwback style, where it's not actually 80s clothes. It's like the decade styles come around every like 10 or 15 years. They become popular again. So that'll just be kind of like the modern take on 80s clothing vibe to it. So
like how a teenager would dress as if they were going to the 80s party.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So you're not going to get actual 80s clothes. You're going to get like modern clothes that are made to look kind of 80s. That allows for smartphones and other stuff to be involved in the story, but they might have a boombox cover on their phone to do like the, say anything thing, or, just you can play with both decades a little bit that way.
I like it.
Now, as far as story goes, are you doing any gender swapping? Are you doing any major changes to the dynamic of the two young boys summoning a woman, or?
I seriously thought about a gender swap. My original idea was to have one boy and one girl and then two female love interests.
Okay.
But with the whole bigger theme that I had put together, I didn't think it would work that well.
I see that I was running into that as well. I was thinking about it being a male and a female character, because that does at least mix it up a little bit, where it's not that kind of like male machismo-y kind of vibe to it. It's more about just being a horned up teenager is more the conversation than the male and female dynamic stuff. I decided for mine Gary, it was really the main horn dog between the two main characters. He was the one that was trying to get with the hot girls at school. That was one that kind of convinced his buddy Wyatt to actually build the thing in the first place. He was the one really motivated by his dick. So I thought, what if Wyatt wasn't like sexually stunted necessarily, but was just kind of confused and went along with it. But as time goes and they have access to this like beautiful woman, it becomes more and more clear to Wyatt himself that he doesn't have the same kind of feelings for this like bombshell woman, Lisa, that they've created for their sexual desires. And it's becoming clear to him that, like, since he now has access to boobies, that he's not that interested in boobies. I mean, that he's starting to realize kind of his sexuality through this process. And so he kind of just went along for the ride because his buddy was, pushing him to. And so by the end of the film, like, he ends up being more buddy-buddy with Lisa. So I needed an actress that was able to do kind of like not butch approach, but a beautiful woman that could be a gross teenage boy at the same time, that would like eat easy cheese out of the can and rip a fart, and just like
be one of the guys.
Just be one of the guys for Wyatt, because that will be more how it turns more into just like another friend than actually like a sexual character for him to use. And so I thought that would be a way to kind of lessen the problems that come from 15-year-old boys and a 28 or whatever year old woman getting it on.
I see it.
Yeah. So for your serious take, let's just go ahead and get into it. Is it tonally kind of the same? Is it a sci-fi comedy, or did you go like action or horror? Like, what are we talking here?
Well, for the serious take, I went still sci-fi comedy, and for White and Gary type characters, they would be kind of college age-ish, and coming home on a break, complaining to their parents about cyberbullies.
Yeah.
And they have some bullies at school that are always hacking into their computer and stealing their homework and just making their life hell, and they're setting magnets on their laptops kind of thing, and just really messing with them. And one of their fathers mentions, "Oh, I've got an old computer in the garage that doesn't connect to the internet." And when they pull it down and start messing with it to work on their project, they realize that this computer actually makes people. So they go back and they say, "Oh, well, we need somebody to help with our science project." So they try to pull out Hedy Lamarr.
Okay.
Instead of a sex symbol, However, you get Gal Gadot as Lisa or Hedy Lamarr, and everybody thinks that they just made a sex doll. Everybody they talk to, oh, you just made a sex doll.
Mm-hmm.
But no, she's actually very intelligent, and she's going to help us with our science project.
Nice. Okay. So it's more than just sexual desire that's motivating them to create this person. It's more like falling across this technology in the first place.
Yes.
And then also like, okay, we get to be a person. Well, we're going to make him a hot. It's a hot person, like definitely. Right. But it's focusing on a number of factors so much. Okay, I like that.
Yeah, and I kind of chose Hedy Lamarr because she was both an accomplished scientist and a Hollywood starlet.
Nice.
Yeah, so.
Okay, that's smart. I like how made it less creepy. So that's good. From doing this show, I am still astounded by just how horny the 80s were. Like all of the 80s, the entire decade. I think it was probably the cocaine that everybody was like coked up and looking to fuck. Like even teen movies are just talking about like balling out people, and it's wild just how aggressively sexual the 80s were.
Yeah, I agree.
So tonally, yeah, I'm definitely jumping between like the 80s and modern day, kind of an 80s throwback retro kind of vibe to it. Yours is modern day with some nods to the original. Who are you doing for a director for your real take?
I thought I would go with Kevin Smith.
Okay.
Because he can bring the dialogue, the comedy, and the heart.
Sure.
Especially with his more recent movies, I've seen a lot of the heart in the movies, and I feel like he can pull all that together.
Well, also, he is not one to avoid a callback or a reference if he can find it.
Or a dick joke. Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah. And to kind of go with the theme, I was also thinking about who might play the theme song, and I'm thinking They Might Be Giants might work out really well for the theme song for this movie.
That would be super fun. I'm a huge fan of They Might Be Giants anyway, so that is perfectly good for me. And also, I don't see Kevin Smith being really mad about They Might Be Giants doing the theme song for his Weird Science remake. I think we're good. All right, so you're doing Kevin Smith.
Yes.
Let's go through the casting here. So you said Gal Gadot or Gal Gadot or however you pronounce her name as Lisa. Who else do you have on your list here?
Okay, I'm thinking for Wyatt, bring in Gianni DeCenzo from Cobra Kai.
Okay, yep. Cobra Kai is such a great series. We're actually about to do a GUI episode on season 3 of Cobra Kai. We just did one.
Watched that in one day. I couldn't stop.
I have like one episode left, I think, and there is no reason it should be as good as it is. But part of that is that they got really good kid actors that are taking this property seriously. Yes, it's goofy and it's a little zany, but it's still got a lot of heart to it. And really, these kids are acting their faces off. So yeah, I think that's a solid choice. His character was on Cobra Kai. I always forget Dimitri. Yeah. So geeky dude. Definitely like geeky, awkward teenager vibe to him. So I think that's about perfect.
And I figure he could play the smart one, and then Jack Quaid from The Boys might be the horny, crazy one.
Okay.
Gary.
Jack Quaid is such a good actor and also amazing comedic timing.
Yes.
I'm deeply impressed with his body of work, and I am also kind of disappointed given his parentage, he should be hotter than he actually is. Like, he's not a bad looking dude, don't get me wrong, but he's got hot celebrity parents, and he grew up around the industry, and from that he's developed great acting talent and also great comedic timing. He knows exactly when to let that joke land.
Yeah.
He's done great by The Boys. So we got that's for Gary, you said?
Yes.
Okay.
And yeah, I put almost as much thought into Chet as I did with Lisa, because Chet has always been one of my favorite characters in this movie, just because he's so much of an asshole, he becomes almost lovable.
Sure.
And for this one, I'm thinking, who could play the biggest asshole, but you still can't hate him as much, be Dax Shepard.
Wow. Okay. Yep. And he has played that role, the lovable dick, many a time in movies. So he knows exactly how to approach that.
Yeah. And the other ones for the bullies, I'm thinking Jesse Eisenberg and Michael Cera could be the hacker bullies.
Okay. So
because I'm thinking they just kind of have that look, and they played kind of roles like that too. So.
And I do like that you aren't approaching it as like jockey dudes or like as bullies or anything. It's more just like other dorks, basically, that are picking on them. Yeah. Because that's always been difficult, especially with 80s movies, is that it's like the geeky nerd is being picked on by the jockey bully kind of vibe a lot of the time. And that's not quite how it works anymore, fortunately, for us nerds. That has changed a little bit.
How many 80s movies had the bully be the star football player?
Right. Imagine you're a football player in the 80s. You've been working your ass off to like get the position of like starting quarterback for your high school football team. You've got like a geeky brother. You've got a great relationship with him. You're like friendly to people. You get along pretty well with everybody. You don't pick on anybody because why would you? You know, you're just all around decent person. And then every movie that comes out the entire time of your high school career has you as this hateful, evil, terrible human being, as with the vapid head cheerleader girlfriend that just is a complete idiot and a total bitch. And you're just like this nightmare couple together. And then you look over at your actual, girlfriend who is the head cheerleader, but she's also rocking a 4.0 GPA and does cheerleading because it looks good on her college resume, and it wants to be a scientist. And you're like, she's nothing like that. I need to make that movie where it's the opposite. Instead of like the nerd being picked on, it's more like the jock that is never taken seriously because he's good at sports.
I would watch that.
Yeah. He'd be like, I actually want to be an oceanographer. And they're like, shut up and throw the football. Like, no, but I care about the planet. Okay, so you've got Chet. You've got the bullies, Ian and Max. You've got Lisa. Do you have anybody else? Do you have the other love interests? Do you have, mall cop?
Well, for the girlfriends, I was thinking, since I have the directors, Kevin Smith, I have to have Harley Quinn Smith in as one of the girlfriends.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Absolutely.
Or the love interests. And I also have Chloe Grace Moretz from Kick-Ass.
Okay. Hell yeah.
I think she would work out pretty well. She's kind of got that liking the nerdy kid vibe.
Definitely. She's like the smart, popular girl, but also like has a thing for awkward dorks.
Yes.
Yeah, I can totally see that. Sweet. Let me get into mine here. We've got for my modern day with an 80s retro flair vibe, I could think of none other than Matt and Ross Duffer, the Duffer brothers from Stranger Things.
Oh, yeah.
Who do the Stranger Things seasons. And I'm always hesitant on the show to do Stranger Things centric stuff because when we first started, all the kids from the Stranger Things were every kid in every adaptation of everything. So yes. I did get the Duffer brothers, but only minimal number of cast members to be involved in this remake. There's a couple, but I didn't load it like I had previously. So that was my one rule to myself.
I had to hold myself back as well.
Yeah, it's tough sometimes. But for Gary, I wanted, a kind of a geeky dude with a chip on his shoulder. And I, like you, for one of the main characters, but for Gary, I went with an actor from Cobra Kai. And I decided to go with Jacob Bertrand. And if you're unfamiliar with the name, he plays Eli Moskowitz or Hawk in Cobra Kai.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, I think he'd be able to play the role of that's kind of the character that he is before he learns karate in Cobra Kai. He's the one that wants to be popular. He wants to be cool. He wants the girlfriend. He's coveting all these things. So it wouldn't be
still is, actually. There's one moment where, hey, I'm still kind of... No, I'm not. I'm not anymore.
Right? Yeah, exactly. Oh, I know exactly what scene you're talking about. Then for his partner in crime in that dynamic duo is one of my, I believe, only two dips into the Stranger Things universe. I decided to go with the actor that plays Will Byers, Noah Schnapp, for Wyatt, who is the quieter one. He's the geeky, nerdy kid. So, you know, I like the thought of like Jacob, who is kind of a loud, like very talkative character on Cobra Kai. And then you've got Will, who is this like tiny, mousy kind of character in Stranger Things. And so kind of bouncing the characters they portrayed in their respective series off of each other, I thought it would make for a really interesting dynamic. You know, the extrovert and the introvert, the nerd and the dork that are like good friends and get into, you know, have a blast with each other, but one ends up pushing the other one to engage in the world a little bit, and then the one grounds the other a little bit. So yes. I think it reminds me of some friendships that I've had growing up. I was, of course, the extroverted nightmare dork when I was growing up. So.
And I was the introverted one who had to be drawn out.
There we go. We should see. We were the weird science kids. Perfect. So that is the dynamic duo there. For Chet, I was wanting to figure out the approach to Chet. For the real take, I wanted to have just like kind of the sense of humor sucked out of the room kind of vibe from this version of Chet. Not that much older than his brother. In his like early 20s, early to mid 20s at that, the oldest, military. And that's why he's home, is that he's in his 20s, but he's not a burnout. He's actually more the other way, where he's just home right now, you know, and is hyper aggressive because he just got out through tour. And so it kind of like humanizes him a little bit, that he's not a dick for the sake of being a dick. It's just that like he's been conditioned to a degree to be that kind of way. And so it humanizes him a little bit. It makes it so he's not this one-dimensional. As much as I love the portrayal of Chet in the original, it was fucking brilliant. I wanted some rationalization.
Yeah.
You know, so I decided to go with, for that, Chandler Riggs.
Oh.
If you are familiar with the name or not, it's Carl from The Walking Dead.
I do like that.
Yeah. So he's not a big dude. He's not, I mean, Carl could probably put on a little bit of muscle for the role, but he's not this massive dude that's like towering over his brother. It's more like they're not too far from the same size, but like one is hyper aggressive and the other one isn't, and one's mousy, and that's the dynamic.
I would like to see him in a role like that.
Yeah. And then we've got for Lisa. This was one of the most challenging choices because it's so easy to just like pick a bombshell, but you want a bombshell that can kind of play in that space of being like the apple of a horny teen's eye, and can kind of act not quite like a normal adult, can be a little buck wild and weird. And so I thought, with her experience from Wolf of Wall Street and Birds of Prey, Margot Robbie would be very interesting as Lisa.
I like it.
And also seeing her in a halter top is not going to be the worst day of my life. So that's...
I'm not going to argue with that.
Yeah. I figure she gets a little bit wacky and wild in Birds of Prey and also Suicide Squad and such. So if she brings that same kind of like manic energy to the role of Lisa, that's really going to translate relatively well. Oh, additionally, one thing I didn't...
Margot Robbie superpowers or genie powers would be interesting.
Totally interesting. One thing I didn't relate with my story arc is the whole, like... Yeah, it just doesn't work quite as well as it did in the 80s. The whole, like, pinning the little cables to the Frankenstein bolts on the Barbie doll thing.
Yeah.
What I figured, and I was actually kind of going somewhere around where you were going with finding the old technology thing, is that Wyatt is playing with a lot of like AI and VR stuff. Like he's trying to learn how to program like VR gaming and building like AIs to run as the game inside the game as non-playing characters.
Yes.
And because he wants to go to school for video game development. He's a big gamer guy. He's got the VR helmet thing, and he's playing with that. And he's also like, because he's a big gamer, goes to like junk shops and stuff to look for like old retro game systems and stuff. And that's when he runs across the hardware from the original Weird Science.
Nice.
And it's kind of the same characters, but it's kind of a nod that this isn't the first time this has happened kind of vibe. And then he uses that while incorporating it into like his VR headset. He's like, there's some 3D mapping that I'm seeing that's been done here in the programming. Let's see what that's all about. And they put on the headset, and then it kind of goes to where there's, earthquakes and lightning and stuff, and they take off the headsets. And that's when Lisa shows up is right then like, oh, fuck, we did this thing. But then it's like revealed later that it's actually like they didn't actually take off their headsets. They're in the VR system the whole time. Like, and it mapped out like a version of their world that they're kind of
Ready Player One type thing going.
Yeah. That basically the whole thing with all the wizard magic and everything is part of the simulation within the VR system. But then there's also like a little nod to where there's something that, the kitchen's still blue or something little like that.
Yeah.
It keeps it kind of ambiguous. I thought would be fun. So then we've got Ian and Max, the two protagonists, that with changing Wyatt to being, realizing he's gay by the end of the movie, I wanted him to have kind of a reveal love interest as well. And so I thought it'd be interesting that instead of having like the two female characters that are like the love interests besides Lisa, that actually one of the bullies ends up like being in the closet, and there being kind of a weird, like it starts as like teasing and then kind of turns into there being kind of almost like an unspoken attraction that then at the party turns into a full on like makeout session. So I thought it'd be fun for the Ian character that was Robert Downey Jr.'s character to end up being gay. And that's why he's picking on people so much, is because he's so uncomfortable, like not expressing who he actually is. So he kind of acts out. And for that role, Justice Smith. And if you haven't seen, if there's a movie called All the Bright Places that he's in, that he's one of the main characters, and he is absolutely incredible. And it's he plays a kid that's dealing with a lot of mental health stuff, and it's really powerful. It broke me. But he also plays Franklin Webb in Jurassic World: Fallen Kingdom. He's Ezekiel Book's Figaro in The Get Down as well. He's a incredibly talented young actor, and I think he would knock it out of the park in this role very well.
Yeah.
Then we've got Max, who is kind of tough just because Max doesn't do much in the original. He's just kind of like the douchey sidekick friend. But I do want to give David Mazouz a little bit more screen time. That is, he plays Bruce Wayne in Gotham.
Yes.
And so he's got that little chiseled jawline. I could see him as being kind of like the, not like jock dick, but more like his parents have lots of money, I'm better than you kind of vibe. I could definitely see him going that route with it. And then finally, Deb, who's the one carryover from the girls that are the love interests. And that's the one that ends up hooking up with Gary at the end. The one girl from his school that they end up becoming a couple. And then, of course, Wyatt ends up being with Ian at the end. I decided to go. That's my other Stranger Things pull. Had to do it. I can't imagine the Duffer Brothers would want to do anything without at least offering one of their female roles to Millie Bobby Brown, because she is so immensely talented, and she's got such a bright career in her future. And I'm sure she would have no problem working with them again. Apparently they have a great working relationship. So for the love interest, Millie Bobby Brown, who's a love interest for Jacob Bertrand, or the guy that plays Hawk in Cobra Kai. So that is my real take there. Kind of modern retro throwback kind of vibe going, with a lot of like retro wave and synth wave in the background, which I've been listening to a lot lately. So that might have influenced this a little bit, watching Cobra Kai and listening to retro wave. So now we're in the middle where we are moving into the goofy versions, the weird takes, the remixes, as it were, of our choices for this movie. So given that it's a wacky movie anyway, did you keep it funny? Did you go super serious? Did you go like drama? Did you go actiony? Like where did you take this movie?
Oh, I took it completely off the rails.
Okay, I'm excited.
My idea was, I'm thinking back in high school, just like the original Gary and Wyatt. They're being bullied at school, and then they come home, and they're also being bullied by their parents and their dad. And their dad is super hard ass, and why can't you just go and defend yourself? And they're kind of getting it from both ends. And so they decide to defend themselves using their intelligence to make a bodyguard instead of their muscles and doing it overcut. As 80s movies tend to go, the bodyguard ends up teaching them how to protect themselves and to protect them.
Sure, it's like the teach a man to fish thing. Or, if they learn to protect themselves, then the bodyguard character can walk off into a foggy night, never to be seen again, and they'll be okay.
Yes.
Nice. Heck yeah. So you're doing more of a, not so much like a horned up teenager kind of vibe, so much as like picked on kids. Now, is this going to be like still in that comedy side, or is it going to be more of a drama, or?
Oh, very much comedy side.
Okay.
So what I ended up doing was the Lisa character is going to come out as Dwayne Johnson.
Wow. Okay.
Yes.
Wow.
And
this is totally
funny.
I mean, I think Dwayne Johnson has bigger breasts than the original actor that played Lisa. But besides that, yeah, that's definitely a very different tone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and actually, my friend Dan's idea, I'm thinking it'd be extra funny if, and I think Dwayne Johnson would do this, Lisa comes out with the same personality as the original Lisa, but the body of Dwayne Johnson.
Oh, they've done similar with Jumanji, so, he can lean in on that a little bit, yeah, for sure. And that would be definitely very fun.
Yes, and so we have the Wyatt type person come out as Kristen Isaiah from Shameless.
Okay, which kid was he?
He was the youngest one.
Okay.
Yeah. And his father is Idris Elba.
Okay.
And I just can't help but picture Idris Elba looking at his son. Why can't you defend yourself?
Right? Like Idris Elba is like smooth, like completely, confident, in control, good to go, and he's got this awkward kid that he just can't even begin to know how to tell him to act like a man or whatever kind of bullshit. But
right, 100%.
Okay, nice.
And the Gary character, I've got Ty Sheridan from Ready Player One.
Yeah, Ty Sheridan is Parzival.
Yes, Parzival.
That's funny. That is very funny. Because that is exactly who I have Ty Sheridan playing on my version too.
Awesome.
Nice.
So I also have the other twist is when the bullies see Dwayne Johnson and realize they can't fight him, they go back to their dad with a cameo from Robert Downey Jr. and he says, "I've seen this before," and helps them make their own bodyguard, played by Batista. So I'm just envisioning some big kaiju battle between Dwayne Johnson and Batista in the middle of the city.
Jesus. I like that. Also, I like that the concept of your take here is that like teenage boys are using their time to create giant muscly men. Like that is what they're focusing all their time and energy is to the biggest beefcakes they can possibly create with their science skills.
I wasn't thinking about that, but yeah, I'm gonna go for it.
Okay, cool. No, I'm super down. Talk about reminiscent of the 80s, because that was all the 80s were the canon films like Rambo and shit, where it's like hyper machismo to the point of it being like borderline pretty gay. So
absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm into it. Cool.
So for the bullies, I have Joe Keery from Stranger Things.
Nice.
And Cameron Monaghan from Gotham and Shameless.
Nice. Okay.
I figure he can play the sadistic jerk.
Yeah.
And Keery can be the muscle.
Yeah, the jerks were not the most sadistic in the original Weird Science so much as they were like lazily bad guys. Like they could never be supervillains because that would require too much time and energy. Like the most that they got is that the kids they pick on happen to be sitting below them at the food court. Like, cool, I guess it's time to do some damage without having to do anything, like no labor at all to do this. Literally drop something. So
all I lose is my Slurpee.
Yeah, you just lose Slurpee. They're like, yeah, I can handle the $2 Slurpee being gone. That's fine.
Right.
Nice. Okay, so a little bit more intentional villainry in this one.
Right, and the love interest, I reached a little bit more. I went with Aaliyah Royale from Walking Dead, The World Beyond, and Cree Cucino from Mr. Iglesias.
I've not seen either one of those yet, actually.
Oh.
So I know Gabriel Iglesias from Mr. Iglesias, but that's it. That's all I got as far as that show goes.
Yeah, it's a basic sitcom, but there are a couple actors in there, including Cree, that just really stand out, and I feel like she can go really far in her career.
Okay, fair enough. And to do that, you need to be able to show your range a little bit. So even though this is a comedy, it's definitely a little bit more challenging than the sitcom that they're on. So yeah, excellent. And
to bring the whole theme together, I have the director as Jake Kasdan from Jumanji.
Okay, I was so mad they were doing a remake sequel of Jumanji, and I determined I was never going to watch it. And then it came out in the theater, did not see it in the theater, came out on one of the movie channels. I ended up breaking down and watching the first one and had so much fun watching it.
Yes.
It's
exactly the same experience.
Yeah.
I had zero expectations. I thought it was going to be horrible until I watched it, and it was just so much fun.
And it was technically a sequel, that it wasn't trying to take away from the original. It was more building on the mythos of Jumanji, which I'm always more comfortable with a sequel than a remake, even though, well, I have a show about remakes, but if you could do some kind of sidestep like they did, then why not? That's one of the issues I had with the 2016 Ghostbusters, is that you could literally have it where they're different characters in a different Ghostbusters locale, and it would have been different. It would have been...
Yeah, just to protect my own psyche, I can only see that movie as a Ghostbusters parody movie.
Okay. That's fair. That's very fair.
But to bring the theme together, I've got the theme song performed by Bare Naked Ladies.
Wow. So just not giving a fuck on the theme song there. It's been 1 week since I created you. I do not have any bands picked out for the soundtrack besides, well, for my first one, it's Retrowave, so you can get Gunship or Scandroid or one of the new modern Retrowave bands to do it, and put some retro funk on there.
I had to go a little extra.
Oh, of course, absolutely, and I do appreciate it very much. Okay, so we got my my weird remake take. I recently watched a film by the name of Freaky, and if you are unfamiliar with this film, it stars Vince Vaughn as a serial killer who, through a series of events, ends up switching bodies Freaky Friday style with a awkward teen girl. And so the teen girl is now got the mind of the serial killer and is going to school and killing classmates. And then the mind of the girl is inside Vince Vaughn. So the entire movie is Vince Vaughn acting like a 16-year-old girl, and this amazing actress portraying this kind of monosyllabic serial killer type character. And it is a total blast. It's so much fun.
Yeah, that is on my list. And I thought it was going to be derivative and bland until I saw Vince Vaughn in the trailer, and I was sold. I've got to see this.
It isn't doing a whole lot different to the story arc of a classic slasher, but it's paying homage and also parodying it at the same time. That it's building on that and kind of riffing on kind of the nature of the slasher film and all the tropes that go along with it, and it's very fun. I thoroughly suggest checking it out. And the director, Christopher Landon, I thought if you were to put a comedic horror kind of vibe to Weird Science and bring it back to that Frankenstein story arc a little bit more, He's also responsible for Happy Death Day 1 and 2, is the same director, which is about like the same day repeating over and like the Groundhog's Day of horror movies. Yeah. So why not do like the horror movie version of Weird Science? And so this is a comedy horror where a lot of things are the same, except I didn't do the like sexual identity confusion stuff. And the relationship with the brother is now that the brother is recently divorced and he's in like his late 40s and is living back at home and is very sensitive about the fact that he's in his late 40s and living with his parents. And so that's where a lot of that rage and weirdness comes with his like fully adult, like older brother that is now living in the house again. But for Gary, for the main character, Gary, like you, I thought Ty Sheridan would be a great choice for that character. He has that ability to both play the like faking being cool and also just the awkward dork as well. So, and that's necessary for that character. Then for his best bud, Wyatt Donnelly, we got Jaden Martell. You may be familiar with him from the movie St. Vincent with Bill Murray. Great movie. And Melissa McCarthy, I think, is in that as well. And also, he's one of the kids from It as well. So he's long neck kid, very gawky, awkward looking dude. But great actor, fantastic actor. So him playing kind of the awkward, geeky younger brother of Vince Vaughn, I thought would be a lot of fun to kind of see how that played out on screen. Because Vince Vaughn is Chet in this. He's the newly divorced, cynical, dark, kind of hateful, but very funny older brother. And I'd love to see what Vince Vaughn would do with the Chet character. They would just like roll camera and be like, just try some stuff and let him go.
He would just eat that up.
Oh, we'd have so much fun with it. Then we've got the love interest, Lisa. And this is challenging. I wanted somebody that had comedic timing, could really play with that role, but also could get gruesome, because this will get a lot more gruesome. The gist of it being a horror movie is that when they create Lisa is far less familiar with the way that people interact with each other than the Lisa that we know from the original. So it ends up going where accidental deaths happen while Lisa is out on the town, where they go to the bar and stuff, that she just doesn't know how to people well at all. And then as the story progresses, there's a split between Gary and Wyatt as time goes, that Gary is getting way too into having this basically like slave that he can like fuck and like send after his enemies and like use the weird like science magic to his own whims, and becomes like this demented person that is using it for wrong. Whereas Wyatt is using kind of their interactions with Lisa to like build up his self-confidence and kind of learn about himself, like kind of to the classic Weird Science, just kind of using that interaction to build self-confidence and, practice talking to girls kind of thing. And then his buddy is just going fully off the fucking rails. And so the villains end up becoming like one of the main boys. Whereas the villains, I got Ian and Max, but they're almost inconsequential villains. They're like the villains that think they're bad shit until like the real villain comes in and it's just like, oh yeah, you're dead. So for Lisa, I wanted an actress that could be gruesome, be fucking terrifying, and fun. There was another actress, Mara Weaving, who was in The Babysitter and the Babysitter sequel. She was in Bill and Ted Face the Music as Theo, I think was the name of her character, was one of the daughters, and then was also in the movie Ready or Not, which is a absolute blast of a horror movie as well. And she's a great actress. She's gorgeous, absolutely stunning, and got some really good comedic timing as well. Then we've got for Ian, one of the two bullies. I have been recently. We started Ozark, the series with Jason Bateman on Netflix, and it's a pretty bleak and dark series. And there's one younger actor on that series that I've come to appreciate, that I think would be interesting to see what they would do in a horror-centric version of Weird Science as the main, popular kid that's kind of a dick. So for Ian, I casted Carson Holmes, who plays 3 in Ozark, which is this little ginger kid that's part of this like redneck crime family. for lack of a better term, in Ozark. I think he'd have a lot of fun in the role, and I just want to see more stuff from him. And then we've got Max, the faithful sidekick, and I decided to go with a kid that has definitely gone dark and creepy. Jackson Dunn. He was the main kid in Brightburn. And if you haven't seen Brightburn, that is like a basically if Superman was evil story that was produced by James Gunn, and I believe written by his brother, or co-written by his brother, I believe. And it's basically the story of Superman, but if like he ends up going bad. So it's this little kid that's like murdering people with Superman powers. It's very, very good. And Jackson, the actor that played the kid, was incredible in it. And just this like kind of rage monster kid that's like hiding it at different points and just playing like the super innocent kid and then murders people. And then finally, Deb, the one of the love interests. I decided to go with Catherine Newton, who was the girl from Freaky, because ultimately, like her character, she is fun when she's the serial killer, but she is very lovable, adorable. Like you're rooting for her even when she's the serial killer in Freaky a little bit. And I thought just to give her a role where she's able to play actually the nice teen woman that is a love interest and don't have to murder anybody. You're actually the innocent in this one. I thought would be nice to see what she would do with that space. That's my horror centric Christopher Landon directed version of Weird Science for this episode.
I do like myself a dark comedy. That sounds...
Oh, it's some of my favorite movies are the dark comedies. There's some that people just haven't seen. Most people have heard of like Heathers or Jawbreaker, or the other night we saw Drop Dead Gorgeous, which if you're unfamiliar, that is definitely falls under dark comedy. It's about teen beauty pageants. And that is very interesting. Now we're going into the mashup categories of Smack My Pitch Up. And good friend Mark Malcolm suggested this one, which I'm interested to see how that works. If we were to mash up Terminator with Weird Science. There's a couple ways to do this.
Yeah.
It depends on how... I think you probably are thinking at least one of the same kind of ways to approach this, but...
I don't know whether it's make a Terminator or make something to defend a Terminator invasion.
That's the two exact different ways that I was thinking we could do this. It's either that the boys themselves create Skynet that ends up becoming like self-aware and they create the first Terminator, or Skynet happens and they use their powers for good to like defend the planet with a hot babe with science electric wizard powers. So I think either way, it's a big win.
Could go either way.
The first time they tried to incorporate like a female Terminator into the Terminator series was Terminator 3, and that went very poorly. So there isn't a really high bar there. Then I think in, what was it? The Dark Fate, the newest one, there was a Lady Terminator as well. Although that in that case, that wasn't that Lady Terminator that was the problem. That whole movie sucked, unfortunately. But I think it'd be more interesting to have the like bodacious babe fighting Terminators.
I agree.
Yeah. Give her like lots of guns and let her go to town on all, like, that's basically a Terminator Resident Evil movie though. When you just get like hot babe with guns killing bad things. I mean,
I can just see wizard powers generating guns out of the air and keep going.
It's basically an X-Man at that point.
Yes.
Okay. I'm into it. I am fully into it. Somebody did suggest that we make Weird Science a John Holmes movie.
Okay.
So, porn version.
It seems a little on the nose, or I don't know.
I mean, that's a pretty... I mean, the plot itself is so able to be transferred into a porn version. It wouldn't be difficult at all. I mean, you have these two teen boys that create a Franken babe to have sex with. So there you go. That's your porn.
That sounds like the premise in general.
And then you get John Holmes to play Chet. There you go. The older brother with the big old dick, and then you're good to go. I think that was Misty Yvonne that suggested that for... oh, no, actually the suggestion was get John Holmes instead of Kelly LeBrock. So the Lisa character would be played.
That would work for yours.
That would work for... Yeah. Could you imagine if, like, later on in Weird Science where the wires are on the missile and the missile ends up coming out, but instead of, like, that, it's at the very beginning, then instead of the Barbie doll, it's like a John Cena toy or something. And it's just like this big dicked like ab dude that comes out and just like, I'm here to fuck. And the boys are like, we don't want to. He's like, tough shit, just ready to go, just hyper masculine, like rage and like full on erection, just like chasing these teen boys around the house.
Well, it's like, I don't know, I might take one for the team.
Yeah, the one of the friends is just like, that doesn't sound terrible. You get John Waters to direct, you're good to go. It's perfect. Oh, God. Yeah. I could actually see that working if you get John Waters involved. So
after he's done with He-Man.
After he's done with He-Man, exactly. So we are at the end, which is where we decide to do a little trailer action for the versions of this. And I think I am going to go ahead and play in the spooky space with my horror version here. Which version do you think you're going to do?
I think I'm going to go with my remix as well.
Okay, sweet. So let me get the music queued up.
No matter what world you live in, bullies will fight the little guy. This summer, fight back. Now with your fist, then a giant fist. Join Wyatt, played by Christian Isaiah, and Gary, played by Judah Lewis, as they make a giant fight for them. Dwayne Johnson will fight Batista in an epic fight in Weird Science. Science first, science hard, no mercy.
Wow. You threw in some Cobra Kai in there at the very end there. So I like the number of times that you said fight in that trailer just to make sure that the point was hammered home. Like, in case you guys are wondering, fighting does happen in this bad boy.
Yeah.
So, all right, I am doing the super spoopy version here. So let's see how well that works out for all of us.
Just when you thought it was safe to put bras on your head, comes a modern retelling of an 80s classic. Meet Gary and Wyatt, two nerdy kids that can't get their dicks wet. But with the help of a homicidal computer wizard babe, they just might. With blood. This summer, join Ty Sheridan and Jaden Martell as the dudes that make a babe. That babe is Samara Weaving from The Babysitter and Bill and Ted Face the Music. Fighting bullies with Ian and Max, played by Kareem Holmes, Carson Holmes, and Jackson Dunn. And Wyatt's brother, Chet, played by Vince Vaughn. This summer, join Catherine Newton from Freaky as she battles a pump saddle sex bot for the heart of Gary. Welcome to Weird Science, class of 2022. Out next summer.
I think getting their dicks wet with blood was maybe a little too far for the beginning of the trailer, but...
I hope I didn't ruin it by laughing too hard.
No, you're good. You're fine. So that is our takes on Weird Science. We're expecting Hollywood to call any day now for our script. There has been conversation about them doing a remake or reimagining of Weird Science, so I am interested to see if that ever... It might be one of those things they talk about for 20 years and never get done, but we shall see. I would suggest if you haven't rewatched Weird Science in a while... Fresh Eyes is definitely an interesting experience to see something that I loved so much as a kid, and I still very much enjoyed it. It was still a good time, but definitely this has aged a bit. And there's some elements to this movie that definitely were from the 80s. The vibe of these characters and even some of the special effects are hilariously dated. But that's part of the fun of the movie now, I want to say. It's just looking at how they looked at technology, relationship, like interpersonal relationships between men and women, and the idea of what is masculine and feminine in the 80s versus now. It's very interesting to see how all of that is handled in this original movie. And I'm interested to see if they do remake, how exactly they handle that stuff for a modern take. So I want to thank my guest, Chris, for coming on. I'm glad we finally got you on an episode. We've been talking about this for literally years.
Yes.
So, and definitely find us next week for those unfamiliar with how we're doing things now, at least for the time being. If it ends up becoming a thing that you guys like, I'll keep doing it. If not, I'll go back to the regular format. I'm doing every other week as a short list episode where I come up with original ideas that aren't reboots or remakes for ideas for movies and TV shows and the like. So next week should be one of those, followed by another full-length Smack My Pitch Up after that. So we'll find you here next time for another episode. I'm Mike the Hobbit, and you just got pitch smacked.
GUIPodcast.com.
It's been 1 week since I created you.
Hey guys, Scotty Big Daddy Preston here. That's right, the Geek Father, asking you to join me here every other week with friends and family of the GUI Network as we go through all the trials and tribulations of being a geeky parent. So remember, join us or cry.
Coming straight from the mouths of madness, I'm Lowdown.
I'm FU Hunter.
Do you love horror?
We fucking do.
So this is a podcast dedicated to all things in cinematic horror. We're talking movies, television, composers, special effects artists. We're gonna fucking cover it.
So if you love horror,
embrace the madness.
My name is Amy Bogard.
And I'm Mike the Hobbit.
And we are the hosts of Deeply Upsetting, where we use our expertise to answer your most upsetting hypothetical quandaries, such as, what non-winged animal deserves wings?
And what body part deserves a secret mouth?
Which cryptid is the worst roommate?
These questions and more that plague you will be answered on Deeply Upsetting, available anywhere you get your podcasts and at GUIPodcast.com.